main attraction that we're going to be talking about here today is the Paycheck Protection Program and a little bit of information on debt relief and the economic injury disaster loan. So that's primarily my job, is try to get that information out to you, the public, and hopefully, you guys can utilize these benefits available to you.
Excellent. And here we have Nancy. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Nancy Loud. I work for the Mass Small Business Development Center. We are resource partners of the SBA. We work very closely with them. And I have in my slides a little bit more about what we do to assist you. And I'll tell you a little bit more as we get going. But I work out of the Southeastern Mass office. I cover a kind of an area south of Brockton, and I work with the Taunton Chamber and lots of folks. And I'm here directly to assist Dan, because these are SBA programs, but as I said, we work very closely with them, and I'll tell you a little bit more about our services in a minute.
Nancy, I also see that Ann is. Ann, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? I think I got to unmute you. Let's see. All right, so as we go along, do you want to share your screen? Oh, here she is.
I've lost my screen. Hi, I'm Ann Fenton. I work with Nancy in the Mass Small Business Development Center. I'll put up our link that you can use if you want to set up an appointment with Nancy, and we can get that scheduled for you. And have a great webinar, everybody.
Yeah, I also see Allison Moriarty, who's, I think it's the same Allison that's in our office as well. This is where we work as a team across the region. So, and again, we're here to help. So.
Awesome. Okay. So I've just enabled share screen if you want to start your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's hope I can get this right. Because that's always the challenge, right? Okay. Hopefully, are you seeing that?
Yes.
I love when a plan comes together. Okay. So, what is the MSBDC and what can it do for your business? This is just a really short overview. But MSBDC is kind of a mouthful, but it means Mass Small Business Development Center. And again, we're partners with resource partners of the SBA. And we're partly funded also by the Mass Office of Business Development. We are part of the SBDC network across the country. Actually, they're in every state. They're typically associated with a university. We are associated with UMass. Our headquarters is out at UMass Amherst, but I work out of the Fall River office. And we're part of the Eisenberg School. And there's a little blurb about our services, but I got a better slides that the words are not quite so small. So I work out of the Southeastern Mass office. If anyone happens to be on this call from other parts of the state, there are also offices in Worcester and north of Boston, the Berkshires. Our idea is that we are supposed to be close to where you are. Right now, we're as close as everyone's computer screen because we're all working remotely for now. But here's what we do. We help companies with a whole range of things, including working on their business plans, their marketing plans, new business formation. Probably one of the most common questions I get are, how do I start a new business? How do I register it? What kind of format should we have? That's probably not the people on this call because most of you are already well into business, but just for future reference, these are services we offer. We do a lot of referrals to lenders, to lawyers, accountants. We help people solve technical problems. Our services are free, and you can work with us as much as you need. We're here to help. So one of the things we've been working very hard on for the past, I don't even know how many months it feels, since March, I guess, right, Dan?
Yep.
All of the programs with COVID, the disaster programs, helping get the word out on these programs, specifically the ones that you're recognizing, I'm sure, because this is right off of SBA's website. Help with the PPP help with the economic injury disaster loans. We also can help on some of the other SBA programs, but mainly the questions I've been fielding for the last few months have been, how do I apply for this? Can you help me with my application? How do I do this? And, you know, the SBA is, these are programs run through the SBA, but they are unbelievably slammed with the amount of work that's gone through their offices. So we try to help lighten the load a little bit, particularly when it comes to applications and things that are coming up next, like forgiveness. So we'll be working hand in hand with them. And that's really what this seminar is about today, is what do you do moving forward? And so for those of you who've been involved in this for a while, you know these programs have changed a lot. They were rolled out quickly to try to address the problems that the economy is facing due to this crisis. So we always have to stay abreast of what's going on. And so I always say, this is our best information as of the day we're giving it to you. And as things change, we try to get the information out as fast as they change as well. I don't work for the SBA, so I can't look at their systems to see where your application is or any of that kind of stuff, but I do help troubleshoot other issues for people. And I know that Dan can address a lot of that because we've been on some seminars before on this. So anyway, I think that's all I've got. And I know you've got questions, so without further ado, I'm going to turn it back to Christine to turn it back over to Dan.
All right, let me see if I can just share my screen here and pull up what I need to. Let's see. Can everybody see what I'm pulling up?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Let me just put it into slideshow format. I think I had some of your slides from last time. Let me just
You can flip through them.
Yep. And then, all right, cool. I think we got it here. So, you know, again, everybody, just introduce myself. I'm Dan Martinello. I'm one of the lender relations specialists here at the SBA office in Massachusetts. And, you know, we're trying our best to, you know, with myself and the rest of my teammates and our resource partners, making sure that we're trying to get out all of this information out to you, the small business community, you know, and like Nancy was saying, you know, this information has drastically changed, you know, from week to week, you know, and it's a lot to keep up with, and that's why it's really important for you, the small business, to know that there are resources out there, you know, that can help you. There's plenty of people that want to, you know, assist you through this process, because it's not easy. And I think most of us at this point know, we're watching the news, or we're reading different articles online, and Congress is talking about maybe some more changes coming with the different programs, more funding, or you know, having funding go to certain and target certain businesses. So, you know, what I'm telling you today, I just want everybody to keep in mind that it may change as early as next week. So, you know, just keep that in mind, that it's not a set in stone program, especially with the PPP, and same thing with the economic injury disaster loan. So, you know, just a quick rundown. You know, this started back in late March. You know, it's gone through, you know, its initial funding it was granted in late March. There was additional funding in April, and then there was for the Paycheck Protection Program, there was a Flexibility Act that made some of these initial rules for the Paycheck Protection Program easier for you, the small business, to kind of gain forgiveness under this program. So that was back in June. So, you know, just a couple other things you want to know about is the economic injury disaster loan application portal. That was down for most businesses for I would say most of June, but now that it's back up for people to apply. You know, there was additional funding appropriated for that program, and they got through the initial most of the initial wave of applications that happened in March and April and May. You know, I think initially this program to get approvals took a little bit longer than what most people anticipated, but with the circumstances with COVID-19, I think no one, and I myself included, thought it was going to be as long of an impact as it has been right now. So, that is always, a little bit difficult when we're trying to get programs where hoping that these will be more short term, but realistically, this is looking like more of a long term, problem. So across the board. So if you haven't applied for the economic injury disaster loan yet, here's the link. You can go. This is the program that's directly run through the SBA. You do not have to go to a lender for this. The application's online. Everything is done online. The application itself takes about 10 minutes. So if you need that link, just go to sba.gov and you can find it right at the top of the page. So for the economic injury disaster loans, just some of the terms, it's a little bit different than the Paycheck Protection Program, because this is an actual loan that's not intended to be forgiven like the Paycheck Protection Program is. Right now, loans are going up to $150,000. That doesn't mean everybody's going to get $150,000. They're going to base that on a case-by-case basis. Interest rates are around 3.75%. For small businesses, if you're a nonprofit organization, it's 2.75%. And the terms are up to 30 years. So, when you're looking at a business loan, if you need a loan to help keep yourself in business and pay fixed debts and payroll and other accounts payable and some other bills, this is a great rate and great terms. A couple things you want to know about this is if you do get approved for this loan and you accept the offer, you're actually going to be, your first 12 months are going to be on deferred payments. Another thing is there is no prepayment penalties. So if you decide that this isn't going to be a long-term loan for you, you can pay it off at any point in time with no prepayment penalties. So again, these are considered working capital loans. You can pay basically your debts on your business had the pandemic not happened. So this isn't a loan that's intended to improve your business, utilize for any sort of expansion or for lost sales or anything of that nature. It's to keep your business going had the pandemic not happened. So on to the nitty gritty with the Paycheck Protection Program. So most important is, I think right now, the hot topic is the forgiveness aspect of the Paycheck Protection Program. I think at this point, if you haven't applied for the Paycheck Protection Program, you have about 4 more days. I think August 8th is the last day. But again, that could change. It could get reactivated and extended out. So just keep that in mind. There is a lot of money still left in the program. So we're still waiting to see what they're going to, eventually do with those funds. So I wouldn't be surprised if it gets extended. But right now, I think a lot of people, especially in Massachusetts, have applied for this. And, they on top of their mind is, how does this program, how does this loan become forgivable? So with the Flexibility Act that was put in place on June 5th, it helped you as the small business kind of alleviate some of the pressures when it came to how much you need to spend on payroll versus other eligible expenses. It gave you a longer period of time that you had to utilize the funds. It put safe harbors in place that affected the employment numbers of your business, and also have safe harbors based on what your state's regulations are with health restrictions and things like that, and how you operate your business now, because that's a challenge for everybody. It really doesn't matter what your business is, at this point. So a couple things you want to keep in mind that have changed on June 5th is your covered period. So when you can utilize the funds, you have up to 24 weeks if you elect to choose that. Initially, it was 8 weeks. This is something that you do not have to let your lender know. This is just something you as a small business can take upon yourself to either elect to use an 8-week covered period or a 24-week covered period. And a lot of questions that sometimes ask if the small business wants to ask for forgiveness prior to those 24 weeks. And the answer is yes, you can ask for forgiveness prior to the 24-week covered period. You do not have to utilize that entire time frame. Also, too, you want to keep in mind that one of the big changes was initially you had to utilize 75% of the loan on eligible payroll expenses. That got lowered to 60% of the loan for eligible payroll expenses. So another thing that changed was the deferral period. Originally, it was on a 6-month deferral period. Now the extended the deferral period to 10 months after your covered period. So your covered period starts from the time you had the funds dispersed to you, and then goes to whatever covered period you decided to utilize, and then you have 10 months after that. And that's technically how long you have to actually submit your forgiveness application as well. So you have that long time. You're not required to pay any payments within that time frame. Also, too, if you applied for the PPP loan after June 5th or after, your actual term changed from 2 years to 5 years. Okay, so prior to June 5th, everybody was on a 2-year term. You can talk to your lender if you applied prior to June 5th and ask if you can have your loan modified to a 5-year term. That has to be agreed upon by you and your lender. So that's going to be case by case, and that's your lender's decision to make. But you can ask and put in a request for that. But just make sure to connect with them as soon as possible if that's what you're looking to do. And then, like I said, the Flexibility Act also had some new safe harbors put in place, because initially June 30th was the deadline as far as making sure that your staff and your full-time equivalent employees were up to par pre-COVID. But now that's extended to the end of end of 2020, so December 31st, 2020. Also, too, there's safe harbors put in place based on the health restrictions that are put in place on your city or your town or the state. So, were you able to? Are you not able to, have full capacity on employment based on health restrictions? And I think a lot of people probably fall under this safe harbor due to that, because I don't think that's going to change anytime in the near future, especially in Massachusetts. So it's going to be hard for most people to be, full capacity when it comes to employment. So as far as the applications go, I think too, another great thing that changed was initially the original application for forgiveness was, very long, and we still have that longer version. It was cut down a little bit, but overall it's still fairly long. But what's most important is the easy forgiveness application. The SBA created this form with the assumption that most small businesses will end up utilizing this easy forgiveness application. So it's only a couple pages. It's there's instructions with it. The instructions are fairly straightforward. And if you're a small business that can basically check a box when it comes to the safe harbors that I was just discussing, you can utilize that easy forgiveness application. So we'll go over those here on the next slide. So as far as the PPP Easy Loan Forgiveness Application, you'll see on the SBA.gov website or the Treasury.gov website, all the information for the PPP program is there. So you have your applications, but you also have the instructions for your applications. So that's really, really important. I can't stress it enough to make sure before you fill out that application, look over the instructions. It's fairly straightforward, but if you have questions, you can always reach out to someone at myself or any of my colleagues at the SBA. Reach out to your resource partners, so Nancy and her team, or any of our other resource partners, such as SCORE, Center for Women and Enterprise, and so on. You want to utilize the resource and tools that you have, and people can help answer questions. It could be something simple that maybe you just missed in the instructions, and having that second set of eyes to help you with that, doesn't hurt at all. So, definitely take your time when it comes to this process. But when you see these few bullets here, if you're in independent contractor, if you're self-employed, you didn't have any employees, then you're basically going to be utilizing this application. There really isn't a reason for you to utilize the long format. And then also too, you'll see on the instructions, if you can check off one of these other boxes, so if you're not a sole prop or independent contractor, but you're a borrower and you did not reduce annual salary or hourly wages for employees by more than 25% during the covered period or your alternative covered period, compared to a period between January 1st of 2020 and March 31st of 2020. And then you also did not reduce the number of employees or the average paid hours between that same time frame in the covered period, or you as the borrower were unable to operate during the covered period at the same level of business activity as before February 15th. So that's kind of that date marker of where they're considering, the COVID issues came into play. So due to compliance with the requirements established or guidance issued between March 1st and 2020 and December 31st, 2020. So that talks about your health restrictions based on state or the local government, and were you able to operate. If you can check off one of those boxes, you'll be able to utilize this application as well. A couple of things when it comes to reduction in salary. I think most of you may have known when you were doing your application that the program required any of your employees that made over $100,000, you had to reduce them, for the calculation purposes to $100,000 or under. So they're not considering those individuals as a reduction of 25% or more, because that was a program requirement. That wasn't something you, the borrower, decided to do. Another thing too, when it comes to reduction in employees, it's going to be very, very important for you as the borrower to notate and keep track of anybody that you attempted to rehire or couldn't rehire back, or had to reduce their hours because maybe they have family issues, daycare issues, whatever the case may be, because of all of what's going on. This program, these safe harbors are in place so it doesn't hurt you, the small business, because you couldn't hire back staff because they didn't want to come back to work, or you had to reduce someone's hours because they requested due to childcare that they needed to work maybe part-time instead of full-time. Those safe harbors will save you from having any part of your PPP loan not forgiven. So just keep that in mind. And then again, the restrictions based on what the state and local governments are saying as far as capacity and your business activity, I think most people will probably be able to check that box. So just keep that in mind. And the instructions make it a little bit clearer here than my slides. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you review the instructions. So as far as the process goes, so right now, the SBA just created the online portal that lenders are to use to submit the forgiveness loan application. So even though people could have technically submitted, their covered period was up and they could have submitted their forgiveness application, the lenders, our lending partners, actually had no way to submit it to the SBA up until about a week ago. So it just became live for them yesterday. And when I say live, it's this time frame they're using to just learn the program and how it works and make sure that they get all their employees submitted into the program so they can actually go through the process. The submission process won't start until next week. So August 10th is that first day where a lender can actually submit this to the SBA. So basically, every lender is going to be a little bit different as far as how they go about this. So you definitely want to get in contact with your lender and see what they want you to do, because some may put this all online versus some may use just the paper application. It's going to be different across the board. So, but overall, what you're going to do is you're going to fill out the forgiveness application, whether it's the easy application or the standard application, and then any supporting documentation that you may need to provide your lender. And the supporting documentation is listed on the instructions of whatever application you're utilizing. So if you have questions on that, just look. It gives you a clear-cut list of what documents you'll need. And then your lender will actually have about a 60-day time frame to review your application. And when I say complete application, that means application with all of your supporting documentations that are required. And then, so after that, during that 60 days that they have to submit that online through the new online format that we gave them to the SBA. The SBA will have up to 90 days to actually remit forgiveness. So they're going to send that payment to the lender. The lender will let you know the amount that was fully forgiven after both the lender and the SBA make the final decision. And when I say the 60 days and 90 days, these are just the longest time frames. I'm not. I don't know if it's really going to be that long for you to find out your answer. It could, once this all gets streamlined, it goes through maybe some sort of kinks I'm sure will be worked out. It may be just a few weeks for you to get decision. It's just going to vary depending on the lender you're utilizing. So also too, you want to just keep in mind when it came to the CARES Act and the programs that were given out, you had the EIDL program, you had the PPP program. Anyone that got an EIDL advance, the SBA is going to deduct that amount from the forgiveness on the PPP. So, if you got $1,000 because you were a sole prop or $5,000, because the CARES Act basically stipulates that the borrower isn't supposed to have more than one grant given to each business entity. So they kind of lump that. The government turns that and says, well, you have already given X amount of dollars that was forgiven, so we're going to remove take that out of the overall forgiveness total when you're applying for forgiveness under PPP. And then, just a couple, things too, you want to just keep in mind as far as the terms on the loan. If there is a portion of your loan that's not forgiven, depending on when you applied, like I said earlier, if it was prior to June 5th, you're probably on a 2-year term. If it was after June 5th, you're on a 5-year term. You have that. Everybody's on a 10-month deferral. Doesn't matter when you applied. And then your interest rate is at fixed interest of 1%, and that doesn't matter when you applied as well. That's the same across the board for everybody. And I won't, because I know we want to get into questions and stuff, and this is just an overview of eligible payroll costs and some other things. So we have the slides, and I can certainly send this over to everybody so that they have them. But again, these are all on the actual instructions itself. So the easy application instructions, the standard application instructions for forgiveness, all of this is listed here. So when it comes to what's eligible payroll costs, quick breakdown, it includes salary, wages, commission, other similar compensation, but you want to remember that there's that $100,000 cap. So based on what cover period you're utilizing, you want to make sure per individual there's going to be maximums that you can provide them from the loan. So $46,154 per individual. If you were utilizing a 24-week covered period, and for the 8-week covered period, it's $15,385. But overall, this kind of lists everything that's covered under eligible payroll costs. And again, this is just an overview of the non-payroll costs. So when it comes to what you can utilize the 60-40 split on the PPP loan fund. So you can utilize it for your lease payments, for real or personal property. You have different types of utility payments that you need for your heat, electric, gas. I know the SBA has kind of made those open to interpretation, so there can be some questions. I know the other day, I think I got a question when it came to vehicle, commercial vehicle leases, and that would fall under lease agreements for real or personal property, not under utilities. So we've had that question come up the last week or so a few times. So I'll answer that just in case anybody had that question. So you want to keep in mind, it's not just the lease for maybe the building you're renting. It can be your leased vehicles for your business as well. And these, again, is just an overview of the safe harbor for maintaining your full-time equivalents. So when it comes to, full-time equivalents, that a full-time equivalent will mean anybody that's working 40 hours or more. The SBA would prorate that based on hour reductions on for part-time employees. So, you can, when you're doing the application, you can add up those part-time employees a couple different ways. You can prorate them based on how many hours they actually work in a 40-hour work week, or you can, anybody that's part-time, you can just put them as like a half of a full-time equivalent, so 0.5 across the board. So if you had, two employees that were 30 hours, two employees that were 10 hours, you can lump everybody into a half of an FTE if you want, or you can prorate them based on how many hours. So, just keep that in mind. And you do have up to the end of the year, you're exempt, as far as reduction in FTE. So based on when what covered period you had, what reference period you utilized on your application when you originally applied, you have until the end of the year to. But again, there's those other safe harbors in place based on situations that you couldn't rehire them back. You couldn't rehire employees that had similar qualifications. You had to reduce employees' hours because they requested reductions for whatever reason, childcare or family obligations, things like that. But make sure you as the borrower and the employer maintain record of all of that. And again, this is just an overview again of just maintaining the employee salary, and wages, and the reduction, the factor of if you have to reduce anybody's salary below 25% or more. Again, I just want to stress, when it comes to this is, this reduction, you're not going to factor in employees that you couldn't retain. You tried to retain and rehire, but you couldn't. You're not going to factor in anybody that you had to reduce based on our program requirements because they made over 100,000. So those are not going to be factored in, and not going to hurt you when it comes to applying for forgiveness. And as far as documentation, I just want to stress that, I can't stress it enough. Documenting everything, you as the employer, you as the borrower, make sure you're documenting everything. Whether that's how much you're paying your employees and how you're paying your employees, how you're keeping track of who's coming back to work, who's not coming back to work, documenting changes in headcount, whether you had to fire someone voluntarily resigns, things like that. You have to keep track of all of that. You're not necessarily going to need to supply that to your lender, but what happens on these forgiveness applications, similar to when you applied for the loan, you're going to be required to initial certifications that you needed the funds. You're telling your lender everything based on the different certifications that are required, because your lender is not going to look at everything. They're going to do their due diligence to make sure like the math and the calculations are correct. And if there's any miscalculation, they'll work with you to remedy that. But they're going to supply on you certifying that yes, you kept track of all of this information. All of your record retention is correct, and you're initialing that. So if the SBA decides to review your loan, they may request that down the line. So you want to just keep that in mind. A lot of the employee retention records won't necessarily need to be passed in unless the SBA decides to review your loan for whatever reason. And then, yeah, so just lastly, I think I'm coming up on my last slides here, and then we can get into questions. Making sure, steps for you as the employees, want to add up the total eligible payroll and non-payroll costs incurred during the period, during the covered period following the disbursement. Calculate any reductions in payroll greater than 25% of the prior quarter by the employee. Reduce total eligible expenses by any payroll reduction, and then calculate any percentage decrease in FTEs from the 24-week covered period versus the comparison period. But again, think about those safe harbors that come into place. And at the very end of it, when you're looking at the easy application, you're going to basically multiply those costs based on 60%, and that's where the calculation is going to determine how much your loan was forgiven. And the intention is for the majority of this loan to be forgiven, if not all. I think probably now, if you've did everything the correct way and you took your time to make sure you did everything the correct way, the only thing you may owe if you got an EIDL advance, there may be that small factor, maybe couple $1,000 that get taken out. But other than that, if you utilize the funds, at least 60% of it for eligible payroll costs, and then the remaining funds for the other eligible non-payroll costs, you should be in the clear and fine. And again, these are just an overview of the different when you're an owner, and your compensation as far as how you calculate that and what how much that you can provide yourself. You want to just keep in mind it's a little bit different than what your employees are. So if you see at the bottom, towards the bottom here, for owner compensation replacement, you're utilizing the 8 weeks worth of your 2019 net profit. So it's upwards of $15,385 for that eight-week covered period, or $20,833 for a 24-week covered period. So it's you want to just keep that in mind if you're dealing with like a sole prop or owner's compensation with the PPP loan. All right, so we can open up to questions. I'll take my screen off.
Thanks, Dan.
Let me see if
We did have a question. Somebody who is in a seasonal job, seasonal business, they wanted to know what exactly do they need to compare their numbers to, what period?
So if they're in a seasonal, I think I'd have to go to the direct, because there's a few dates that they can utilize. It's like it's basically, I think it reads any 12-week period from, I want to say it's March through September of the year prior. That's what they would need to compare it to. So it's any 12-week period. I can, if that person wants, I can get them the exact wording for it, but they can basically utilize, compare any 12-week period that they had in 2019. I think it's going from, I just forget the exact date in March. It's from March through, I think, the end of September.
And so if they can't get the number of employees back as compared to that time
Well,
period?
then there's the safe harbors are in place. So, I mean, they realistically, I mean, there's probably, you can utilize either one of those safe harbors. So as long as you can document that you, in good faith, tried to rehire individuals, but they couldn't come back for, I mean, there's a variety of reasons. I mean, people for health reasons aren't going to want to come back. Maybe, they're on unemployment and they, they're not electing to come back based on that. Or, you have child obligations and you can't come back to the same amount of hours. You just have to document that. You have until the end of the year to try to, get your FTEs up to your normal FTEs. But if you can't, those are where the safe harbors come in place. Also, to the health restrictions, can you operate your business at normal levels based on the health restrictions put in place by the state or your city or town? A lot of people, the answer is no. So that safe harbor, most people should probably be able to check off as well. So, so as long as you can check off one of those boxes, you should be, fine. They're not going to reduce your forgiveness because of things out of your control.
So the only options you have right now are just 8 weeks and 24 weeks. What if you use the funds by 12 weeks? Can you apply then?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned like earlier, if you elected the 24-week period, you don't technically need to wait the full 24 weeks, or you don't have to show that you use funds over a 24-week time frame. You can use them over maybe a 10-week time frame, a 12-week time frame, and submit for forgiveness. I think we were getting a lot of questions, say maybe a few weeks ago, because some people have gone past their 8-week period. Some people have, gone 16 weeks, whatever the case may be. and they wanted to submit for forgiveness. The only thing is the portal for lenders to actually start that whole process didn't exist until yesterday. So, right now, a lender realistically, even if they took your application, the first day that they have to actually submit that application for forgiveness isn't until next week, August 10th. And it's not the lender's fault. So
sorry, Dan, we've really been counseling people to take their time and not rush.
And EIDL forgiveness, that too.
Yeah.
So
the questions on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the EIDL program is, the loan itself is not a forgivable loan. It's pretty much a standard, small business loan. The only things you really can't use it for, you can't completely pay off debts. It's not intended for you to expand your business or really like improve your business. It's there. Those funds are there for you to utilize over the long term to keep your business running had the pandemic not happened. So the one thing that is kind of it's coming to light, or it's confusing a lot of people, because it was put in the CARES Act that the advance part, so the advance itself, which was that those funds of up to 10,000 a small business could get, that portion was always intended to be a forgivable grant. But within the CARES Act, there's wording that basically when it comes to grants, the government is only allowing for one grant per entity. So with that said, the PPP, that whole program is considered, really, it's supposed to be a grant. It's not, very little of it should be turned into a loan at the end of the day if you used it properly. So they're going to combine those two, because if you got the EIDL advance, they're going to say, well, when you apply for forgiveness, we've already given you X amount of dollars as a grant. So they're going to factor that in to the overall forgiveness decision on the PPP because of what the CARES Act says. Now, and I know that probably gets people hot because it's not hugely clear. And yes, you got to read through the X amount of pages in the CARES Act, and really, who does that, to find that information. And this is why, I think it's really important to wait and really make sure before you apply for forgiveness, let things work themselves out in the government, because I wouldn't be surprised, based on all the changes being made and the uproar of it, that when it comes to this next wave of stimulus or changes, that doesn't get changed itself. So, just keep in mind, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, what I'm telling you right now, it could drastically change in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I just saw a question come up on that about something the Secretary of the Treasury floated as an idea. And it's good to pay attention to the news and the idea that anything under a certain amount would just be forgiven, but it's not decided yet. So you have to go by whatever the decisions are at the time we're presenting this, which is all that we know. If anyone really wants to be always up to date, you have to look at the Treasury homepage, which we can give you the link. If you go to Treasury,
Treasury.gov, yeah,
Treasury.gov.
And then you'll see big red, COVID-19 PPP program. You really can't miss it.
So, and that's where they post anything to do with PPP regulations there. So, but don't overreact to things you hear in the news until it becomes real. That's all we can say about that. I saw that question come out.
So with salary, I know the minimum has to be 60% for the PPE, but they can use more than that for payroll?
Yeah. That's just the minimum. And even with the minimum, the way the Flexibility Act is right now, let's say you only used 50%. That doesn't mean your entire your entire loan will not be forgiven because you didn't hit 60. They'll just prorate it based on what percentage you got to. But for your loan to be fully forgiven or intended to be fully forgiven, you have to at least utilize 60% of the loan for eligible payroll costs.
And so for the EID loan, can somebody pay themselves as a salary because they just launched their company? they don't really have any money to pay themselves, but switching to a virtual base, would it cover something like marketing and finding out other ways on how to get yourself up off the ground?
So for the EIDL loan, for the EIDL loan, you can utilize that for payroll. So people can have both loans. So you just want to be careful mixing the uses when it comes to that. So if you had the EIDL loan and the PPP loan, and you were intending to use both for payroll, you just want to make sure that you're not utilizing it for the same pay period. So let's say you got the EIDL first, and you didn't get and you used it for payroll in April. You didn't get the PPP until now, and you utilized the PPP in August. That's fine. You just can't utilize both during the same period, but you can utilize EIDL. That is one of the, I think I had on the slide, is one of the eligible costs you can utilize. It's just, and then any other everyday operational, payments that you would pay, whether it's utilities, whether it's, paying down debts that you normally would pay on a month-to-month basis, had the disaster not have occurred. It's just, if you had, say you got 150,000 and you were like, well, let me completely pay off all my vehicle loans. Well, would have you have done that? That's not the intention. It's not to improve your business, because would you really have done that or been able to do that if the disaster had not happened? You probably wouldn't have paid $100,000 loan off, over the last few months if you didn't get those funds, because you said you need because the funds, you're saying that you need the funds to keep your business going, not improve your business, keep your business open.
And landlords, they can collect EIDL, correct, to apply for future rent that they might not collect? How does that work?
So as far as as far as who's eligible for the EIDL loans, that list is much more extensive than the PPP. PPP, it's not, it's not open to everybody, whereas the EIDL is pretty much open to anybody that's a nonprofit, landlord, and as far as like how much they give, that's going to be case by case. So the disaster center is a whole different side of the house. You have your field offices and you have your disaster center. The field offices make that determination based on the information that you give them at the time of application. So it's typically going to be based on what you received in past rent. We don't typically deal with landlords for our normal SBA program, so I'm not, huge on how much they would give per person. It really comes down to what the disaster center feel is the need based on the information that they gave them from the application. So that could be different, across the board, and that's really going to be the same way for all businesses in general. The disaster center is actually going to make that determination. It's not like the PPP where there's calculations that are given to everybody based on what your business is. You can look up, okay, this is how I do my calculation, and this is the amount I get based on that calculation. It's subjective on the EIDL side of things. They don't make us privy to all of that, so I don't have like a full underwriting breakdown of it.
We've been telling people to estimate 2 to 3 months of working capital. Is that still a good number?
Yeah, it's just we've asked them the question, so they kind of hold it, close to the vest, and they don't give us a direct answer. So I always get a little wary of saying yes, that's what it is, because I don't get a direct answer myself when I ask. so yeah, it's a little tough.
We have another payroll question about which taxes are not covered under the PPP. Is it just the business portion of FICA or Medicare?
Which are not covered, you said?
What payroll taxes are not covered under PPP?
I'd have to actually like look at the full overview. I don't know all off the top of my head what are not covered as far as taxes go. When it comes to supplying the information for your calculation, I know they're utilizing gross amounts before taxes, and that's how they're getting their calculations. So I don't know as far as eligibility, like I haven't heard of things not being eligible to be paid, but I'll have to double check on that and look into it.
Okay. And you had mentioned that you had to notify the state within 30 days of an employee either voluntarily not returning to work or they asked for limited hours, or basically they're not being hired back for whatever reason. What if the employee had left and they didn't have that 30 days? So the 30 days had already passed. And then what kind of documentation are you exactly looking for? Email communication, some type of something in writing? What would pass as that?
So as far as like documentation, I would implore anybody to look at the direction. It tells you verbatim what documentations you should retain. The SBA is not actually going to have small businesses submit that documentation. It's more on the certification of the business saying, yes, we did keep track of this record retention. It can vary based on the business, but as far as when it comes to rehiring people, you definitely want to have that in writing, that you offered them their job back at, whatever the salary was. And then I know you might not get back a written response or something in writing. So, that's going to be, different based on the business or the employee and how they respond to that. So however they respond to you as the employer, just keep track of that and have that record. As far as anybody who was on unemployment, it's this program, right? It's intended to get people off of unemployment, to get them back into the workforce. So if you do offer your employees jobs back, in writing, and then they decline, maybe they're looking to stay on unemployment, or they decline for a variety of reasons. But if they were on unemployment, you technically, as an employer, have the obligation to let the unemployment office know, because if they're going to continue to stay on unemployment, they're telling unemployment that they can't find work, ultimately. So, they got their job offered back. So that's not necessarily telling the truth. I know that gets tricky based on, everybody's situations, but that's the intention, of the program, is to get the people back into the workforce. And staying, just because they want to stay on unemployment is not, a good enough reason, for the employee, not the employer.
Dan, I've been getting a lot of questions on this, and including people thinking that they cannot fire people for cause. So say employees not showing up for work or things like that, and they think that, and I said, no, that's not true, but just
that's why the safe harbors are in place.
Document.
Just document it. How would you document, any of these situations? Reduction in staff hours, firing employees. Prior to the COVID, as an employer, you should always be documenting that.
Yes.
Because you can come up with, when it comes to unemployment reaching out to you or any sort of legal issues happening, you need that documentation to back yourself up as the employer. You don't want to run into any situation.
I usually tell them to send registered mail if they need to, because sometimes the employee will go quiet and not say anything. So if you have to force the issue, send something registered mail so that you can then document exactly what you did. But it's not, that's not a requirement under the law or anything like that. But
and you don't have to be stuck with an employee just because you're trying to get forgiveness on the
that's exactly
PPP program. That's not the intention of this, to keep on employees that are going to negatively affect your business. As long as just make record of it if you have to let them go, and that's where the safe harbors come into place.
Yeah, right.
And so when you say letting them go, if there's a part-time employee, but the business really needs a full-time employee, but they need to be part-time, the reduced hours, and if the business cannot accommodate that, how would they handle that?
So it's all about, recording that. So it's just, you got to record those conversations. There's not as far as, legally, in the directions, there's not a specific piece of paper that they have to say, okay, this is the only way you have to record that. It's just, do you have record? If your loan was ever to be reviewed because maybe there was issues with employment or the calculation, can you supply the SBA information that shows communication between you and that employee talking about their employment situation, or but that can be done in a formal standard letter. Those can be done through email. I mean, there's a variety of ways. The SBA doesn't say it can only be one way.
Yeah.
But I would say probably, phone conversations, that's kind of hard, just because you can't document, a lot of what's said. So any way you can, document the words and the communication. But again, that can be done in a variety of ways.
Does anybody have any more questions? Anything they'd like to submit? So you'll get Ann and Dan's and Nancy's contact information in a follow-up email. So if anybody has any questions, you can just reply to that too, and we'll forward that on to the SBA and the MSBDC. So I want to thank Dan, Nancy, Allison, and Ann for being here, and it's going to be quite the task, I guess.
Well, like I would say, and I think Dan would totally agree, don't be in a rush. Get your ducks in a row. Get your documentation in a row. But that doesn't mean you have to file immediately, because you never know what's coming down the road. It could be another rule that will benefit you. So don't be in a rush, because up until, they don't even have those portals open yet.
August 10th is the first day, and realistically, if you think you're going to get an answer that day, it's not going to happen. I'll tell you, it's not. So don't be in a rush to get an answer, because you're not going. It's not. The answer isn't going to come very quickly.
But we're here to help all the way through. I'm sure that this is what we'll be doing for the rest of the year. Sure.
Yeah.
Almost thought you were going to say rest of our life. Whew, good.
I hope not.
No, please.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much again, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Dan, I have a question. I'll send you an email about, okay?
All righty. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye, everyone.